The moment Katherine Wilson stepped off the dusty stagecoach in Bannack, Montana territory, she knew she had made a terrible mistake. The year was 1865, and the Civil War had just ended, leaving the nation raw and bleeding. But Katherine's personal war was just beginning. The spring air carried a hint of warmth, but Katherine shivered beneath her threadbare traveling coat as she surveyed the rough-hewn buildings that comprised Bannack's Main Street. Gold had been discovered here just a few years prior, transforming this spot of wilderness into a boomtown almost overnight. Now, it teemed with prospectors, gamblers, merchants, and all manner of fortune-seekers. "Last stop, Bannack," called the stagecoach driver as he tossed down her single valise. Katherine clutched her reticule tighter, feeling the meager contents, $3.72, that represented the sum total of her worldly fortune. She had spent nearly everything to make this journey west, following the promises in Edward's letters. Edward Blackburn, her fiancé of 2 years, had written of the gold he'd discovered, the house he was building for them, and how he awaited her arrival so they could finally marry. But Edward wasn't at the depot to meet her. "Miss, you waiting for someone?" the stagecoach driver asked, preparing to leave. "Yes," Katherine said, straining to keep her voice steady. "My fiancé. I'm sure he'll be along shortly." The driver gave her a skeptical look. "Well, good luck to you, miss." As the stagecoach pulled away, Katherine stood alone at the depot with her valise, the dust settling around her boots. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly, and she moved to stand under the narrow overhang of the depot roof, scanning the street for any sign of Edward. 1 hour passed. Then 2. The shadows lengthened across the street. Miners and townspeople came and went. No one matching Edward's description appeared. Katherine approached the depot clerk, a thin man with spectacles perched on his nose. "Excuse me, sir. I'm looking for Edward Blackburn. Do you happen to know him?" The clerk's expression changed subtly. "Blackburn, you say? Are you family?" "His fiancé," Katherine replied, a knot forming in her stomach. "He was to meet me today." The clerk removed his spectacles, polishing them slowly with a handkerchief. "Miss, I'm afraid I have some distressing news. Edward Blackburn was killed 3 weeks ago in a mine collapse." It was a terrible accident. The world seemed to tilt beneath Katherine's feet. "There must be some mistake. I received a letter from him just a month ago." "No mistake, miss. I'm sorry. The whole town attended the burial. His claim was sold off to cover his debts." Katherine felt the blood drain from her face. No Edward, no future, no home waiting for her, and now no way back east. She had nothing. "Are you all right, miss?" the clerk asked, reaching out a hand as Katherine swayed slightly. She straightened her back. "Yes, thank you for the information." Her voice sounded distant, as if someone else were speaking. She picked up her valise and walked back outside into the gathering dusk. The reality of her situation crashed over her like a wave. She was alone in a frontier town with no money, no connections, and nowhere to go. The enormity of it all threatened to overwhelm her, and she felt hot tears welling up in her eyes. No, she wouldn't cry. Not here, not where everyone could see. Katherine Wilson had not survived losing both parents to illness, raising her younger siblings, and enduring the hardships of war to break down now. She blinked rapidly, fighting back the tears that threatened to spill. "Pardon me, madam." Katherine nearly jumped at the deep voice behind her. She turned to find herself face to face with a tall man in a worn leather vest and dusty trousers. A cowboy, by the look of him, with a tan Stetson pushed back on his head. His face was weathered from sun and wind, but his blue eyes were kind beneath the brim of his hat. "You've been standing here since noon," he said, his voice gentle. "Are you waiting for someone?" "No," Katherine answered, her voice threatening to break. Not anymore. The cowboy studied her face, noticing how she kept blinking, how her hands trembled slightly as they clutched her valise. "You don't have to hide your tears at the depot," he said softly. "Most folks here have known their share of heartache." Something in his words, the simple kindness of them, broke the dam inside her. A sob escaped her throat, and then another. Katherine covered her mouth with her hand, mortified to be crying in front of a stranger. The cowboy didn't say another word. He simply reached into his pocket, pulled out a clean bandana and offered it to her. "Name's Quinn Quincy," he said as she accepted the bandana. "Most folks call me Quinn." "Katherine Wilson," she replied, dabbing at her eyes. "I've come all the way from Boston." "That's a mighty long journey to end in tears, Miss Wilson. Do you have somewhere to stay tonight?" The question brought her back to her immediate predicament. "I'm afraid not." Quinn nodded thoughtfully. "Mrs. Parker runs a boarding house for respectable ladies. It's clean and safe. I can take you there if you'd like." Katherine hesitated. In Boston, she would never have accepted help from a strange man. But this wasn't Boston, and she had precious few options. "That would be very kind," she said finally. "It's no trouble. I was heading that direction anyway." He reached for her valise. "May I?" She relinquished her bag, and they began walking down the main street. The last rays of sunlight gilded the rough buildings, lending them a momentary beauty. "I don't mean to pry," Quinn said after they had walked in silence for a few moments, "but you look like someone who came expecting to be met." Katherine swallowed hard. "My fiancé, Edward Blackburn. I just learned he died 3 weeks ago." Quinn stopped walking. "Blackburn? From the Eastern Star Mine. You knew him?" Hope flared briefly in her chest. "Not well," Quinn admitted, "but enough to know he was well liked. I'm sorry for your loss, Miss Wilson." They continued walking, Katherine acutely aware of the curious glances from people they passed. A woman alone in a mining town attracted attention, and not always the welcome kind. "Here we are," Quinn said, stopping in front of a 2-story clapboard building with a small, neat garden out front. "Mrs. Parker's boarding house." The door opened before they could knock, revealing a plump, gray-haired woman with a stern expression that softened when she saw Quinn. "Evening, Mrs. Parker," Quinn said, removing his hat. "This is Miss Katherine Wilson, newly arrived from Boston. She's in need of lodging." Mrs. Parker's shrewd eyes assessed Katherine. "A respectable woman, I presume?" "Yes, madam," Katherine replied, straightening her shoulders despite her exhaustion. "She was engaged to Edward Blackburn," Quinn added quietly, Mrs. Parker's face transformed with sympathy. "Oh, my dear girl. What a terrible shock you must have had. Come in, come in." Quinn set Katherine's valise down in the entryway. "I'll leave you in Mrs. Parker's capable hands, Miss Wilson." "Thank you, Mr. Quincy," Katherine said, suddenly reluctant to see him go. "For everything." He smiled, a warm, genuine smile that reached his eyes. "Quinn will do, and you're welcome, Miss Wilson. Perhaps I'll see you around town." As he turned to leave, Mrs. Parker called after him. "Quinn, don't forget you're expected for Sunday dinner tomorrow, 1 o'clock sharp." "I'll be there, Mrs. Parker," he promised, settling his hat back on his head before walking back into the gathering darkness. Mrs. Parker ushered Katherine inside. "Now, let me show you to a room, dear. You look dead on your feet." The room was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a small window overlooking the back garden. Mrs. Parker brought up hot water for washing, and a tray with bread, cheese, and tea. "The rate is $1 a week, includes breakfast and supper," Mrs. Parker explained. "But we can discuss that tomorrow after you've had some rest." Left alone, Katherine finally allowed herself to fully feel the crushing weight of her situation. Edward was gone. The future she had planned, the life she had imagined, all of it gone in an instant. She undressed mechanically, washed in the cooling water, and put on her nightgown. As she lay in the unfamiliar bed, staring at the shadows on the ceiling, she wondered what tomorrow would bring. She had no money, no prospects, no connections. And yet, as she drifted towards sleep, she found herself thinking of kind blue eyes and a gentle voice that had said, "You don't have to hide your tears at the depot." The next morning, Katherine woke to sunlight streaming through her window and the smell of coffee and bacon wafting up from below. For one blissful moment, she forgot where she was and why. Then reality crashed back and she closed her eyes, willing herself to find strength. She dressed in her one other gown, a serviceable blue calico, and pinned up her dark blonde hair as neatly as she could. Her reflection in the small mirror above the washstand showed a woman of 22 years, with hazel eyes now rimmed with red and a determined set to her jaw. Downstairs, she found Mrs. Parker in the dining room with two other women, both older than Katherine. "Ah, there you are, my dear Mrs. Parker said. "Come meet Miss Abigail Foster and Mrs. Eliza Hammond, my other boarders." Miss Foster was a spinster schoolteacher with iron-gray hair and a kind smile. Mrs. Hammond, a widow in her 40s, worked as a seamstress. Mrs. Parker told us about your situation, Miss Foster said as Katherine sat down to breakfast. "It's terribly unfortunate, but you're welcome here." "Thank you," Katherine replied, touched by the woman's kindness. "If you're looking for employment, Mrs. Hammond added, buttering a piece of toast, "there are limited options for a respectable woman in Bannack. Teaching, sewing, domestic service, or perhaps clerking at one of the stores." Katherine nodded, grateful for the practical advice. "I can sew reasonably well, and I worked as a shop girl in Boston for a time." "I might need help with orders," Mrs. Hammond mused. "Business has been increasing lately." After breakfast, Katherine approached Mrs. Parker about her boarding situation. "I have very little money," she admitted. "Just enough for a week, perhaps two." "Don't fret about that now," Mrs. Parker said firmly. "We'll sort something out. Now I've laid out Edward's things for you to look through. The sheriff brought them over this morning when I sent word you were here." In the parlor, a small trunk contained all that remained of Edward Blackburn's life: some clothing, a few books, a pocket watch, and a small leather pouch of gold dust. There was also a stack of letters tied with string. "My letters to him," Katherine whispered, running her fingers over her own handwriting. But there was nothing of real value, nothing that could sustain her for long. Even the gold dust would only last a few weeks if she was frugal. "I'll need to find work immediately," Katherine said, more to herself than to Mrs. Parker. "Sunday's not the day for that," Mrs. Parker replied. "Today you rest and get your bearings. Tomorrow's soon enough to start looking." Katherine spent the morning arranging Edward's things and writing a letter to her younger sister back in Boston, explaining what had happened. At noon, Mrs. Parker reminded her about Sunday dinner. "I've set a place for you," she said. "Quinn always joins us on Sundays, and it'll do you good to meet a few friendly faces." Katherine changed into her best dress, a dark green wool that had seen better days but still looked respectable. She was pinning a cameo brooch to her collar when she heard voices downstairs. Quinn had arrived, along with Reverend Thomas and his wife from the local church. Katherine paused at the top of the stairs, suddenly nervous. These people were strangers, yet they were now the closest thing she had to friends in this wilderness. When she descended, Quinn was the first to notice her. He stood immediately, a gesture of gentlemanly respect that seemed at odds with his rugged appearance. Today, he wore a clean shirt under his vest and his dark hair was neatly combed. "Miss Wilson," he said with a slight nod. "It's good to see you looking more rested." "Thank you, Mr. Quincy," she replied formally, though she found herself warming under his genuine smile. "Quinn," he corrected gently. Everyone calls me Quinn. Dinner was a simple but hearty affair: roast chicken, potatoes, green beans from Mrs. Parker's garden, and fresh bread. The conversation flowed easily, with the Reverend and his wife inquiring politely about Catherine's journey west. "And what was your profession in Boston, Miss Wilson?" Mrs. Thomas asked. "I worked in a millinery shop," Katherine explained. "I designed hats and assisted customers." "A milliner," Mrs. Parker exclaimed. "Why didn't you say so? Bannack has no proper hat shop. The ladies order from Helena or have their old hats refurbished by Mrs. Hammond." "It's true," Mrs. Thomas nodded enthusiastically. "I would love to purchase a new hat without having to send away for it." Quinn had been quiet during this exchange, but now he spoke up. "The empty storefront next to the assay office might suit for a shop. Rent's reasonable." Katherine blinked, surprised by the sudden direction of the conversation. "I couldn't possibly open a shop. I have no inventory, no materials, no capital." "But you have skill," Quinn pointed out, "and there's demand." "He's right," Reverend Thomas agreed. "The town is growing. The rough and tumble days are giving way to civilization. Ladies want finery." Catherine's mind raced with possibilities. She did have skill. She'd been the most sought-after designer at Madame Fortier's in Boston. And she had Edward's gold dust, which might be enough to purchase basic supplies. "I'll think about it," she promised, not wanting to commit to anything so soon. After dinner, while the others retired to the parlor, Quinn asked Katherine if she would like to take a walk. "It's a fine afternoon," he said. "And perhaps seeing more of Bannack might help you decide about your future here." Katherine hesitated only briefly before agreeing. She fetched her shawl and they set out into the sunshine. Bannack on a Sunday afternoon was relatively quiet. Many businesses were closed, though the saloons were doing a brisk trade. Quinn led her along the main street, pointing out various establishments and telling her about the town's short but colorful history. "Gold was discovered here in 1862, he explained. "The population boomed overnight. At its peak, there were nearly 5,000 people here." "And now?" Katherine asked, looking around at what seemed a much smaller settlement. "Maybe 1,000, Quinn admitted. "Some moved on to newer strikes, but those who stayed are building something permanent. There are families now, not just prospectors." They walked past the assay office and Quinn pointed to the empty storefront he'd mentioned. "That's the place I was thinking of. Good location. Gets plenty of foot traffic." Katherine peered through the dusty window. The space wasn't large, but it would be sufficient for a modest millinery shop. There was even a counter and some shelving left behind by the previous tenant. "It has possibilities," she conceded. "Everything has possibilities," Quinn said, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Even the most unlikely things." They continued their walk, crossing to the residential area where neat cabins and more substantial houses were beginning to replace the tents and rough shelters of the early mining days. "What brought you to Bannack?" Katherine asked, curious about this man who had shown her such kindness. Quinn's expression grew more serious. "The war," he said simply. "After Gettysburg, I'd seen enough killing to last several lifetimes. Headed west to find something different." "You fought for the Union," he nodded. 4 years. Started as a cavalryman, ended as a captain." Katherine processed this information. "My brother Thomas fought as well. He didn't come home." "I'm sorry," Quinn said softly. "Too many good men didn't." They walked in silence for a moment, each lost in thoughts of what the war had taken. "And what of your family?" Katherine asked eventually. "Are they back east?" A shadow crossed Quinn's face. "My parents are both gone. Father in 59 from pneumonia, mother in 61 from heartbreak," folks said. "I have a younger brother in California. Haven't seen him in years." "So you're alone too," Katherine said, then blushed at her forthrightness. Quinn's expression softened. "Not so alone. I have friends here, people I care about." They had reached the edge of town, where the buildings gave way to open country. The mountains rose in the distance, still snow-capped despite the spring warmth. "It's beautiful," Katherine admitted, gazing at the wild landscape. "Different from anything I've known, but beautiful nonetheless." "It grows on you," Quinn said. "The space, the freedom of it." As they turned back toward town, Katherine found herself wondering what it would be like to stay in Bannack, to build a new life here. The thought both terrified and exhilarated her. "Thank you for showing me around," she said as they approached Mrs. Parker's boarding house. "My pleasure, Miss Wilson." "Katherine," she said impulsively. "If I'm to call you Quinn, you should call me Katherine." His smile was warm enough to chase away the late afternoon chill. "Katherine, then." At the boarding house door, he hesitated. "I want you to know if you decide to stay, to open that shop or do something else entirely, you have friends here, people willing to help." "Thank you," she said, touched by his sincerity. "That means more than I can say." As Quinn took his leave, Katherine watched him walk away, his tall figure silhouetted against the setting sun. For the first time since arriving in Bannack, she felt a flicker of hope. The next morning, Katherine rose with a new determination. After breakfast, she announced her intention to inquire about the empty storefront. "A fine idea," Mrs. Parker approved. "And if you need any introductions around town, I'm happy to oblige." Katherine's first stop was the assay office, where she learned that the adjacent storefront was owned by Mr. Frederick Jenkins, the town's most prominent merchant. His general store was located at the other end of the main street. Jenkins' Mercantile was busy when Katherine arrived. She waited patiently until Mr. Jenkins, a portly man with impressive side whiskers, was free to speak with her. "A hat shop, you say?" he mused, stroking his whiskers thoughtfully. "Interesting proposition. Rent's $10 a month, payable in advance." Katherine's heart sank. $10 was nearly all she had. "I see, and the terms of the lease, 3 months minimum. I'd need the first month's rent immediately to hold it." Katherine took a deep breath. "I'd like to think about it overnight, if I may." "Take your time, Miss Wilson." "Property's been empty for 2 months now. Another day or two won't matter." As she left the Mercantile, Katherine calculated frantically. If she paid the first month's rent, she would have almost nothing left for inventory or living expenses. It was a gamble she couldn't afford to take. Lost in thought, she nearly collided with Quinn, who was coming out of the telegraph office. "Katherine," he said, pleasantly surprised. "How are your inquiries going?" She explained her dilemma, trying to keep the disappointment from her voice. Quinn listened thoughtfully. "What if you had a partner? Someone to invest in the business while you provided the expertise?" "A partner," Katherine repeated, skeptical. "Who would want to partner with a woman they barely know on a business that might not succeed?" Quinn's blue eyes held her steadily. "I would." Katherine stared at him, taken aback. "Why would you do that?" "Because I believe in investing in the future of this town," he said simply. "And because I think you have the determination to make it work." "But you hardly know me," Katherine protested. "I know enough," Quinn replied. "I know you came 2,000 miles on your own to start a new life. I know you faced terrible news with dignity. And I know that despite everything, you're still looking for a way forward, not a way out." Katherine was touched by his assessment, but still hesitant. "It's a generous offer, but I couldn't accept without understanding what you'd expect in return." "A fair share of the profits once the business is established," Quinn said. "Nothing more. And if it fails, we chalk it up to experience and move on. No harm done." They were standing in the middle of the boardwalk, people moving around them as they talked. Katherine was acutely aware of the curious glances being cast their way. Perhaps we could discuss this somewhere more private, she suggested. Quinn nodded. The hotel has a respectable dining room. We could talk there over lunch. The Goodrich Hotel's dining room was quiet at this hour. They sat at a corner table, and Quinn ordered coffee for both of them. "Now," he said once they were alone, "tell me exactly what you would need to start your shop." Katherine had been thinking about this since dinner the previous evening. Rent for the space. Basic supplies: felt, silk, ribbons, feathers, wireframes, tools, and enough living expenses to tide me over until the business starts generating income. And how much would all that cost? Katherine named a figure that made her wince. It was more money than she had ever handled at once in her life. Quinn didn't blink. "That seems reasonable. I can advance that amount as a business investment. We'll draw up a proper agreement, of course." "Why are you really doing this?" Katherine asked, still not entirely trusting his motives. Truthfully. Quinn was silent for a moment, contemplating his coffee cup. "When I came to Bannack 3 years ago, I had nothing but my horse, my gun, and nightmares from the war. A man named Henry Miller took a chance on me, hired me to manage his ranch even though I knew next to nothing about cattle. He said he trusted the look in my eye." He looked up at Katherine. "I'm doing well now. The Circle Q is my own spread, small but growing. I believe in passing on the same kind of chance that was given to me." Something in his straightforward explanation rang true. Katherine found herself wanting to trust him, despite her natural caution. "If I accept," she said slowly, "I want everything in writing. And I want to repay your investment as soon as possible, with interest." Quinn smiled. "I wouldn't expect anything less. Shall we visit Mr. Hollister at the bank this afternoon? He can draw up the necessary papers." By the end of the day, Katherine had signed an agreement with Quinn, secured the storefront from Mr. Jenkins, and ordered initial supplies through the mercantile. Things were moving so quickly that she hardly had time to catch her breath, let alone question whether she was making the right decision. That evening at the boarding house, Mrs. Parker and the other ladies expressed their approval and excitement about Katherine's venture. "The ladies of Bannack will be delighted," Mrs. Hammond declared. "I've been saying for ages that we need more refinement in this town. And Quinn Quincy is a good man to have as a partner," Mrs. Parker added with a knowing look that Katherine chose to ignore. "He has a solid reputation." Over the next few weeks, Katherine threw herself into preparing her shop. The space needed cleaning and minor repairs, which Quinn arranged through his connections in town. Supplies began arriving from Helena and even San Francisco. Katherine set up a workstation in the back of the store and began creating sample hats to display. Quinn visited regularly, often bringing small items he thought might be useful: a better lamp, a comfortable chair for the workroom, a sign for the front of the shop. His thoughtfulness touched Katherine, though she maintained a careful professional distance. She learned more about him through their conversations and from others in town. Quinn had indeed built the Circle Q ranch from nothing, and it was now a respectable operation with a growing herd and several hired hands. He lived there most of the time but kept a room at the Goodrich Hotel for his frequent visits to town. "He's considered one of the most eligible bachelors in the county," Miss Foster informed Katherine one evening as they sat stitching in the boarding-house parlor. "Several young ladies have set their caps for him, but he's shown no serious interest in any of them." "Our arrangement is strictly business," Katherine said firmly, ignoring the flutter in her stomach whenever she thought of Quinn's smile. "Of course, dear," Miss Foster replied with a knowing look that matched Mrs. Parker's. 2 weeks after signing the lease, Wilson's Millinery was ready to open. Katherine had created a dozen exquisite hats, each showcasing her skill and artistic eye. The front window display, featuring her finest creation. A pale blue bonnet adorned with silk roses and delicate lace had already drawn admiring glances from passing ladies. The night before the grand opening, Katherine worked late, making final adjustments to the displays. Quinn arrived with a small package just as she was about to leave. "A token for tomorrow's opening," he said, handing her the carefully wrapped parcel. Inside was a beautiful brass bell for the shop door. "Quinn, it's perfect," Katherine said, genuinely touched by his thoughtfulness. "Every proper shop needs a bell," he replied with a smile. "Would you like help installing it?" They worked together to mount the bell above the door, their hands occasionally brushing as they positioned it just right. Katherine was acutely aware of Quinn's proximity, of the clean scent of soap and leather that clung to him, of the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. "There," he said finally, stepping back to admire their handiwork. "Now it's a proper shop." Katherine smiled up at him, suddenly shy. "Thank you, not just for the bell, but for everything. I couldn't have done any of this without you." "You would have found a way," Quinn said with certainty. "You're a determined woman, Katherine Wilson." Their eyes met and held for a moment too long. Katherine felt a warmth spreading through her that had nothing to do with the spring evening. Quinn cleared his throat and stepped back slightly. "I should let you get some rest before your big day tomorrow." "Yes," Katherine agreed, breaking the spell between them. "Tomorrow will be busy." He walked her back to the boarding house, their conversation turning to practical matters about the shop opening. At the door, he wished her good luck and took his leave with a tip of his hat. Katherine watched him go, her emotions in turmoil. She had come to Bannack to marry Edward, to build a life with him. Now, less than a month after learning of his death, she was thinking of another man in ways that made her both excited and guilty. "It's too soon," she whispered to herself as she climbed the stairs to her room. "Far too soon." But as she lay in bed that night, it was Quinn's kind blue eyes and warm smile that filled her thoughts, not memories of Edward. Wilson's Millinery opened to great success. Ladies from Bannack and even neighboring settlements came to see the new shop and its beautiful wares. By mid-afternoon, Katherine had sold 5 hats and taken orders for 7 more. Her cheeks hurt from smiling, and her voice was growing hoarse from talking, but she felt a surge of pride in what she had accomplished. Quinn stopped by late in the day, hanging back as Katherine finished with a customer. When the shop was finally empty, he approached the counter with a broad smile. "Congratulations," he said warmly. "Looks like Bannack was more than ready for a millinery shop." "It's been wonderful," Katherine admitted, her eyes shining with excitement. "Better than I dared hope." "I knew you'd succeed," Quinn said, his pride in her evident. "You have a natural talent for this." Katherine blushed at his praise. "I have a long way to go before I can repay your investment." "I'm not worried about that," Quinn assured her. "The shop is already proving its worth." They were interrupted by the bell over the door as Mrs. Jenkins, the merchant's wife, entered with 2 companions. "I'll leave you to your customers," Quinn said, tipping his hat to the ladies as he made his exit. Mrs. Jenkins watched him go with interest before turning to Katherine. "That man has never shown such enthusiasm for a lady's hat shop before," she commented with a knowing smile. "One might think he has interests beyond the business itself." Katherine kept her expression neutral as she showed the ladies her latest creations, but Mrs. Jenkins' words echoed in her mind. That evening, Katherine returned to the boarding house to find a letter waiting for her, a response from her sister Abigail in Boston. She took it to her room to read in private. Abigail's letter was full of sympathy for Edward's death, but also practical questions about Katherine's future. Would she return to Boston now? There was nothing for her in Montana, Abigail argued. She could come home and resume her position at Madame Fortier's. Katherine sat by the window, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and crimson as she contemplated her sister's words. A month ago, she might have agreed that there was nothing for her in Bannack. But now there was the shop, which was already showing promise. There were new friends who had welcomed her with open hearts, and there was Quinn. She couldn't deny it any longer. She was developing feelings for the quiet, kind-hearted rancher who had become her business partner and friend. It had happened so gradually that she hadn't noticed until it was already too late to guard her heart. But was it too soon after Edward? Would it be disloyal to his memory to allow herself to care for Quinn? Katherine had no answers, only questions that kept her awake long into the night. The following weeks brought a steady rhythm to Katherine's new life. The shop flourished, with orders coming in faster than she could fill them. She hired a young woman named Lily to help with basic stitching and minding the counter while Katherine created her designs. Quinn continued to visit regularly, often bringing small gifts, fresh flowers for the shop, a new ribbon he thought would complement a hat she was working on, once even a kitten he'd rescued from a storm drain to keep the mice away from her precious silks. They developed a comfortable friendship, taking Sunday walks together after church or sharing occasional meals at the hotel dining room. Katherine found herself looking forward to his visits, her heart quickening at the sound of his voice or the sight of his tall figure through the shop window. June brought warmer weather and preparations for Bannack's Independence Day celebration. The town planned a grand affair with a parade, picnic, dancing, and fireworks. Katherine's shop was busy with ladies ordering new hats and bonnets for the occasion. "You'll attend the dance, won't you?" Quinn asked one afternoon as he helped Katherine close up shop. "I hadn't really thought about it," she admitted, though in truth she had thought of little else. "It seems frivolous." Quinn leaned against the counter, studying her face. "It's been nearly 3 months, Katherine. Allowing yourself some joy doesn't dishonor Edward's memory." Katherine glanced up, startled by how accurately he had read her thoughts. "Is it that obvious?" "Only to someone who's been watching you as closely as I have," Quinn replied softly. The quiet admission hung in the air between them. Katherine felt her cheeks warm under his steady gaze. "Yes," she said finally, "I'll go to the dance." Quinn's smile could have lit the darkening shop. "Good, I'll look forward to it." The week before the celebration, a package arrived for Katherine from Helena. Inside was a length of beautiful blue silk, the exact shade of a summer sky, with a note in Quinn's distinctive handwriting. "For your Independence Day gown. Every shop owner should outshine her merchandise." Katherine pressed the luxurious fabric to her cheek, deeply moved by his thoughtfulness. With Mrs. Hammond's help, she worked late into the evenings to create a gown worthy of the occasion and Quinn's gift. The 4th of July dawned clear and warm. Bannack was decked with flags and bunting, and an air of festivity permeated the town. Katherine spent the morning at the shop, which was busier than ever with last-minute customers, before closing early to prepare for the evening's festivities. Back at the boarding house, she bathed and dressed with unusual care. The blue silk gown was her finest creation, with a fitted bodice, graceful bell sleeves, and a skirt that swirled elegantly when she moved. She arranged her hair in a sophisticated style, with soft curls framing her face, and added the cameo brooch that had been her mother's. When she descended the stairs, Mrs. Parker's eyes filled with tears. "Oh, my dear, you look absolutely beautiful." "Truly stunning," Mrs. Hammond agreed, adjusting a fold of Katherine's skirt. "Quinn Quincy won't know what hit him," Katherine blushed. "It's not like that," she protested weakly. "Of course not, dear," Mrs. Parker said with a wink. "Now, shall we go? The dancing will be starting soon." The town square had been transformed for the occasion. Lanterns hung from ropes strung between buildings, casting a warm glow over the makeshift dance floor. A band was set up on a platform, tuning their instruments. Tables laden with food and drink lined one side of the square, while benches and chairs provided seating for those not dancing. Katherine felt a flutter of nerves as she walked alongside Mrs. Parker and Mrs. Hammond. It had been so long since she'd attended a social event of any kind. In Boston, before the war, she had enjoyed dancing and parties. Since then, life had been all about survival. They had barely reached the edge of the square when Quinn appeared at her side. He was dressed in his finest, a dark suit, crisp white shirt, and polished boots. His hair was neatly combed, though one rebellious lock fell across his forehead in a way that made Katherine's heart skip. "Katherine," he said, his eyes taking in her appearance with undisguised appreciation. "You look absolutely beautiful." "Thank you," she replied, suddenly shy. "And thank you for the silk. It was incredibly generous." "It was worth every penny to see you in it," Quinn said, offering his arm. "May I escort you to the refreshments?" As they moved through the crowd, Katherine was aware of curious glances and whispered comments. The town had been speculating about her relationship with Quinn for weeks, and their appearance together at the celebration would only fuel the gossip. But for once, Katherine didn't care what others thought. Tonight was about joy and celebration, about embracing the new life she was building in Bannack. The band struck up a lively tune, and couples began to fill the dance floor. Quinn turned to Katherine with a questioning look. "Would you do me the honor?" he asked, extending his hand. Katherine placed her hand in his, feeling a thrill at his touch. "I'd be delighted." Quinn was an excellent dancer, leading her confidently through the steps of the reel. Katherine matched him move for move, laughing as they twirled and spun among the other couples. "You've been holding out on me, Miss Wilson," Quinn said with a grin as the music ended. "I had no idea you were such an accomplished dancer." "There are many things you don't know about me yet, Mr. Quincy," Katherine replied, surprised at her own boldness. Quinn's eyes darkened slightly. "I look forward to discovering each and every one of them." They danced several more times, stopping occasionally for refreshments or to chat with friends. As the evening progressed, the band shifted to slower, more romantic tunes. When the first strains of a waltz filled the air, Quinn led Katherine back to the dance floor. This dance was different, closer, more intimate. Quinn's hand rested lightly at her waist, and Katherine was acutely aware of his touch, of the scant space between their bodies as they moved in perfect harmony. "I never expected this," she said softly, looking up into his eyes. "What's that?" Quinn asked, his voice equally quiet. "Any of it. Coming to Bannack, losing Edward, starting the shop." She paused, gathering her courage. "Meeting you," Quinn's arm tightened slightly around her waist. "Do you regret it?" "No," Katherine answered honestly. "I'm sad for what I lost, but I can't regret where it's led me." They danced in silence for a moment, the music weaving around them like a spell. "Katherine," Quinn said finally, his voice serious. "There's something I need to tell you, something I should have said weeks ago." Katherine's heart raced. "Yes." Before Quinn could continue, a commotion at the edge of the square interrupted them. Raised voices and the sound of breaking glass drew everyone's attention. "Stay here," Quinn said, releasing her reluctantly. "I should see what's happening." Katherine watched as he made his way through the crowd toward the disturbance. She could see several men arguing, their voices growing louder and more aggressive. Suddenly, a shot rang out, followed by screams and confusion as people scrambled for safety. Katherine lost sight of Quinn in the chaos. Panic gripped her as more shots were fired. "Katherine," Mrs. Parker appeared at her side, grabbing her arm. "Come away, it's not safe." "But Quinn," Katherine protested, straining to see through the dispersing crowd. The men will handle it, Mrs. Parker insisted, pulling her toward the boarding house. That's the Simmons brothers causing trouble again. They've been drinking all day. Reluctantly, Katherine allowed herself to be led away, looking back anxiously over her shoulder. The celebration was breaking up in confusion, the joyful atmosphere shattered by violence. Back at the boarding house, the women gathered in the parlor, speculating about what had happened and who might have been hurt. Katherine stood by the window, watching the street anxiously for any sign of Quinn. It was nearly midnight when a knock came at the door. Mrs. Parker answered it to find Sheriff Davis on the porch. "Evening, ladies," he said, removing his hat. "Just wanted to let you know the situation's under control. The Simmons boys are locked up and they'll be facing charges this time." "Was anyone hurt?" Katherine asked, unable to contain her worry any longer. "Quinn Quincy took a bullet to the shoulder," the sheriff said, and Katherine felt the blood drain from her face. "Doc Winters is tending to him now, says he'll be fine with rest." "Thank you for letting us know," Mrs. Parker said, glancing worriedly at Katherine's pale face. After the sheriff left, Katherine turned to Mrs. Parker. "I need to see him." "It's past midnight, dear," Mrs. Parker objected, "and you're not family." "I don't care," Katherine said with uncharacteristic firmness. "I need to know he's all right." Mrs. Parker studied her for a moment, then nodded. "I'll go with you. It wouldn't be proper otherwise." They walked quickly to Dr. Winters' office, where they found Quinn sitting on an examination table, his shirt removed and his left shoulder bandaged. His face was drawn with pain, but he managed a smile when he saw Katherine. "You shouldn't be here," he said weakly. "As if I could stay away," Katherine replied, moving to his side. "The sheriff said you were shot." "It's just a graze," Quinn assured her, though the blood-stained bandage suggested otherwise. "Doc says I'll be right as rain in a week or two." Dr. Winters, a grizzled man in his 60s, snorted. "What I said was you need complete rest for at least a week. No riding, no lifting, and definitely no ranch work." "I can't just lie around for a week," Quinn protested. "I have responsibilities." "You have men who can handle things," the doctor countered firmly. Katherine touched Quinn's good arm gently. "Dr. Winters is right. You need to rest and heal." Quinn looked at her, his expression softening. "I'm sorry about the dance. I had planned for the evening to end very differently." Katherine blushed, aware of Mrs. Parker and the doctor listening. "There will be other dances." "Can he be moved tonight?" Mrs. Parker asked Dr. Winters. The doctor nodded. "To the hotel, yes. I've given him something for the pain, but he shouldn't be alone. I'd like someone to check on him regularly for the next day or so." "I'll stay with him," Katherine said immediately, then flushed at the impropriety of her offer. Mrs. Parker cleared her throat. "Perhaps a more suitable arrangement would be for Quinn to stay at the boarding house. We have an empty room on the ground floor, and between the four of us ladies, we can ensure he's properly cared for." Dr. Winters nodded approvingly. "That would be ideal. Much better than the hotel." "I couldn't impose," Quinn began, but Katherine cut him off. "It's settled," she said firmly. "You're coming to the boarding house until you're well enough to return to your ranch." Too weak and in too much pain to argue further, Quinn reluctantly agreed. Dr. Winters helped him into a clean shirt, and with Katherine and Mrs. Parker supporting him, they made their way slowly to the boarding house. The next few days established a new routine. Quinn was installed in the downstairs bedroom, and the ladies of the boarding house took turns checking on him, bringing meals and changing his bandages. Katherine opened the shop as usual during the day but hurried back whenever she could to sit with Quinn. These quiet moments together, away from the curious eyes of the town, allowed for conversations that deepened their understanding of each other. Quinn told Katherine about his dreams for the Circle Q, about the nightmares from the war that still sometimes woke him, about the brother in California he hoped to reconcile with someday. In turn, Katherine shared stories of her childhood in Boston, of her parents and siblings, of her hopes and fears for the future. She found herself able to speak of Edward, too, of the man he had been and the life they had planned together. "He was kind and ambitious," she told Quinn one evening as they sat in the boarding house garden, watching the sunset. Quinn was recovering well, able to move around with only minimal discomfort. "We met at a church social. He was working as a clerk then but talked endlessly of going west, of making his fortune." "Do you think you would have been happy here with him?" Quinn asked carefully. Katherine considered the question seriously. "I think I would have tried to be," she said finally. "But Edward was a dreamer, always looking to the next big opportunity. I wonder if Bannack would have satisfied him for long." Quinn nodded, understanding. "Some men are built that way, always chasing the horizon." "And you?" Katherine asked. "Are you chasing horizons too?" Quinn's eyes met hers, steady and sure. "No. I found what I was looking for the day I saw a brave woman trying not to cry at the depot." Katherine's breath caught at the simple declaration. Before she could respond, Mrs. Parker called them in for supper, and the moment passed. But something had shifted between them, a truth acknowledged if not yet fully expressed. As Quinn's recovery progressed, Katherine found herself dreading his eventual return to the Circle Q. She had grown accustomed to seeing him each day, to sharing meals and conversations, to the quiet comfort of his presence. A week after the shooting, Dr. Winters declared Quinn fit enough to return to light duties. "No heavy lifting for another week," he cautioned. "And come see me if there's any sign of infection." That evening, Quinn found Katherine in the parlor, stitching a hat for Mrs. Thomas. The other ladies had tactfully made themselves scarce, leaving them alone for the first time since Quinn's injury. "Doc says I can go home tomorrow," Quinn said, settling into the chair across from her. Katherine kept her eyes on her stitching. "That's wonderful news. You must be eager to get back to your ranch." "Yes and no," Quinn admitted. "The Circle Q needs attention, but I've enjoyed my time here." "We've enjoyed having you," Katherine replied, still not meeting his eyes. "Mrs. Parker will miss having a man around the house to fuss over." "And you, Katherine?" Quinn asked softly. "Will you miss me too?" Katherine finally looked up, her composure slipping. "You know I will." Quinn moved from his chair to kneel beside hers, taking her hands in his. "Then come with me." "What?" Katherine whispered, stunned by the request. "Not like that," Quinn clarified quickly, a flush rising to his face. "I mean come visit the ranch, bring Mrs. Parker as chaperone if propriety demands it. I want to show you the Circle Q, to share that part of my life with you." Relief and disappointment mingled in Katherine's heart. "Oh, yes, I'd like that. Perhaps on Sunday," Quinn nodded, not releasing her hands. "Katherine, what I was going to tell you at the dance before the shooting, yes," she prompted when he hesitated. "I care for you," Quinn said simply. "More than as a friend or business partner. I understand if it's too soon after Edward or if you don't feel the same, but I needed you to know." Katherine felt tears welling in her eyes, but these were different from the tears she had hidden at the depot months ago. These were tears of joy, of possibility. "It's not too soon," she whispered. "I've tried to tell myself it was, that I shouldn't feel this way so quickly. But the truth is, I care for you too, Quinn. Very much." The smile that broke across Quinn's face was like sunrise after a long night. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers in a gentle, questioning kiss. Katherine responded with a tentative sweetness that quickly deepened into something more sure. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless. "Well," Quinn said, his voice rough with emotion, "I believe that settles that." Katherine laughed softly, her heart lighter than it had been in years. "I believe it does." Sunday dawned clear and beautiful, perfect for Katherine's first visit to the Circle Q Ranch. Mrs. Parker agreed to accompany them, though she made it clear she considered it a formality. "Everyone in town knows you two are courting now," she said matter-of-factly as they set out in Quinn's wagon. "It's about time, if you ask me." The drive took nearly an hour, following a well-traveled road that wound through rolling hills covered with sage and grass. As they crested a rise, Quinn pulled the wagon to a stop. "There it is," he said with quiet pride. "The Circle Q." Below them lay a picture-perfect ranch, a sturdy main house built of logs and stone, several outbuildings, corrals filled with horses, and beyond them, the sweep of grassland where cattle grazed. A stream meandered through the property, lined with cottonwoods that provided welcome shade. "It's beautiful," Katherine said sincerely. "You've built something wonderful here, Quinn." "It's still growing," he replied. "But yes, I'm proud of it." They continued down the hill, arriving at the main house to be greeted by Quinn's ranch foreman, a weathered man named Tom who tipped his hat respectfully to the ladies. "Everything's shipshape, boss," he reported. "No problems while you were gone." "Good man," Quinn said, helping Katherine and Mrs. Parker down from the wagon. "Ladies, allow me to show you around." The tour began with the house, a surprisingly comfortable dwelling with a spacious main room featuring a stone fireplace, a well-appointed kitchen, and several bedrooms. The furnishings were simple but of good quality, and there were unexpected touches of refinement: books on shelves, curtains at the windows, even a piano in one corner. "My mother's," Quinn explained when Katherine ran her fingers over the keys. "I had it shipped from St. Louis. Can't play a note myself, but couldn't bear to part with it." Outside, Quinn showed them the barns, corrals, and gardens. Katherine was impressed by the orderliness of everything, the clear evidence of careful planning and hard work. "You've thought of everything," she commented as they walked back toward the house. "Not quite everything," Quinn admitted with a sideways glance at her. "The place still needs a woman's touch." Katherine blushed at the implication but found she wasn't afraid of it. The idea of sharing this life with Quinn, of building something permanent together, filled her with a quiet joy. Mrs. Parker, walking slightly ahead, pretended not to hear. They enjoyed a wonderful meal prepared by Mrs. Chen, the Chinese woman who cooked for the ranch hands. Afterward, while Mrs. Parker rested on the porch swing, Quinn took Katherine for a walk along the stream. "What do you think?" he asked as they strolled beneath the cottonwoods, their leaves rustling softly in the breeze. "Could you see yourself being happy here?" Katherine stopped, turning to face him. "Are you asking what I think you're asking, Quinn Quincy?" Quinn took both her hands in his. "I suppose I am, in a roundabout way. It's too soon for a proper proposal. I respect your mourning for Edward too much to rush you. But I want you to know that's where my heart is heading, Katherine Wilson. Straight toward asking you to be my wife." Katherine felt tears welling in her eyes, but unlike those she had hidden at the depot, these were tears of happiness. "And I think my heart is heading straight toward saying yes." Quinn's smile outshone the summer sun. He pulled her into his arms, kissing her with a tender passion that left no doubt of his feelings. Katherine returned his kiss with equal fervor, her heart singing with the rightness of it all. When they finally broke apart, Quinn rested his forehead against hers. "I never expected this," he whispered. "When I saw you at that depot trying so hard to be brave, I just wanted to offer comfort to a stranger. I had no idea you'd change my whole life." "We changed each other's lives," Katherine corrected gently, "and I'm so grateful for it." As they walked back to the house, hand in hand, Katherine reflected on the strange, winding path that had brought her to this moment. She had come west with one dream, only to find another, better one waiting for her. Edward would always have a place in her heart, but it was Quinn's steady, kind, loyal Quinn who had helped her find her way forward. With him, she had discovered not just love but a sense of belonging she had never known before. As summer turned to fall, Catherine's shop continued to thrive. Quinn courted her openly now, taking her to dinners at the hotel, escorting her to church each Sunday, and bringing her out to the Circle Q whenever her business allowed. The town watched their courtship with approval, and not a little satisfaction. Many claimed to have predicted it from the start. In October, exactly 6 months after Catherine's arrival in Bannack, Quinn took her for a ride into the hills above town. The aspens were turning gold, and the air had a crisp edge that hinted at the winter to come. They stopped at a clearing with a magnificent view of the valley below. Quinn spread a blanket beneath a golden aspen tree and produced a picnic lunch from his saddlebags. "This is perfect," Katherine said, breathing in the clean mountain air. "I've never seen anything so beautiful." "I have," Quinn replied, his eyes fixed on her face. Katherine blushed, still not entirely accustomed to his compliments. "You're good for my vanity, Quinn Quincy." "Just telling the truth as I see it," he said with a grin, pouring her a cup of coffee from a thermos. They ate in comfortable silence for a while, enjoying the food and the view. When they had finished, Quinn reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "Katherine," he said, his voice suddenly serious, "I've been carrying this around for weeks, waiting for the right moment. I think this is it." Catherine's heart began to race as he opened the box to reveal a delicate gold ring set with a small but perfect diamond. "I love you," Quinn said simply. "I love your strength, your determination, your kindness. I love the way you've built a new life here through sheer will and talent. I love the woman you are and the woman you're becoming." He took a deep breath. "Katherine Wilson, will you marry me?" Tears spilled down Catherine's cheeks as she nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Quinn, I will marry you." Quinn's hands shook slightly as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. "It was my mother's," he explained. "I've had it sized for you." Katherine looked at the ring sparkling in the autumn sunlight, then at the man who had given her heart a second chance. "I love you, Quinn, so very much." Their kiss sealed the promise between them, a vow as true and lasting as the mountains surrounding them. They were married on Christmas Eve in the small church in Bannack. The building was decorated with evergreen boughs and red ribbons, and candles glowed in every window. Despite the winter chill, the church was filled to capacity with friends and well-wishers. Katherine wore a gown of ivory silk that she had designed and sewn herself, with Mrs. Hammond's help. Her veil was adorned with tiny pearls that caught the candlelight. Quinn, standing tall and proud at the altar, wore a new black suit and a look of such joy that it brought tears to many eyes. Mrs. Parker, who had become like a mother to Katherine, gave her away. Miss Foster played the piano, and Reverend Thomas performed the ceremony with eloquence and warmth. "I, Keegan James Quincy, take you, Katherine Elizabeth Wilson, to be my lawfully wedded wife." Quinn's voice rang clear and strong as he spoke his vows. "To have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do us part." Catherine's voice trembled slightly as she repeated her own vows, but her eyes never left Quinn's. When Reverend Thomas pronounced them husband and wife, the church erupted in applause and cheers. The celebration continued at the hotel, where the dining room had been transformed for a wedding feast. There was dancing and laughter, toasts and tears. Katherine moved through it all in a happy daze, scarcely able to believe that this was her life now that she was Mrs. Keegan Quincy, that this wonderful man was her husband. Later that night, as Quinn's sleigh carried them through the snowy darkness toward the Circle Q toward home, Katherine nestled against her husband's side, overcome with gratitude for the journey that had brought her here. "Happy?" Quinn asked, his arm tight around her. "More than I ever thought possible," Katherine replied, tilting her face up for his kiss. As the years passed, the Circle Q prospered and grew, as did Wilson's millinery. Katherine maintained the shop, training apprentices and expanding her business to include dressmaking. Quinn's ranch became one of the most successful in the territory, known for its quality stock and fair dealings. Their greatest joy, however, was their family. In the fall of 1867, Katherine gave birth to their first child, a son they named James Edward, after both their fathers. 2 years later came Elizabeth Rose, a daughter with Katherine's hazel eyes and Quinn's determined spirit. In 1872, they welcomed another son, Thomas Henry. And in 1875, their family was completed with the arrival of Mary Grace. Through it all, the joys and sorrows, the challenges and triumphs of building a life together in the frontier West, Quinn and Katherine's love only deepened. They never forgot how they had found each other, a broken-hearted woman hiding her tears at the depot, a kind-hearted cowboy who had seen her pain and offered comfort. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Quinn surprised Katherine with a gift, a small golden locket. Inside was a tiny painting of the Bannack depot. "To remind us where our story began," he said, as he fastened it around her neck. Katherine touched the locket, then reached up to touch her husband's still handsome face, now weathered by years in the Montana sun and wind. "I came west looking for one dream and found another, better one instead," she said softly. "Every tear I shed that day was worth it, because they led me to you." Quinn pulled her close, his love for her as strong as it had been on that first day when he'd seen a brave woman trying not to cry, and had offered her his handkerchief and his heart. "You don't have to hide your tears anymore," he whispered, echoing the words he had spoken so long ago. "Not from me, not ever." And Katherine, secure in the knowledge that she was truly, deeply loved, smiled up at her husband through happy tears. "I know," she said, "and that's the greatest gift of all." Together they walked hand in hand back to the house they had filled with love and laughter, their children and grandchildren waiting to celebrate with them. The journey that had begun with heartbreak at a dusty depot had led to a life more beautiful than either of them could have imagined, a testament to the power of second chances and the enduring strength of hearts brave enough to love again.